Hey everybody, welcome to Missing Links with John, Brock, and myself, Stephen King, where we discuss what's missing in Web3 architecture.
So this week we're going to talk about ETAs, Ethereum Transactions as a Service.
For feedback, please go to missinglinks.fm, send us an email, give us some feedback on what we discuss and what you'd like us to cover next week. All right, let's get into it.
How you guys doing?
Good. Yeah.
Good. Where are you, Brock, and where are you, John? Because Brock, I'm not sure if you're traveling or not. I forgot to ask that.
No, I just got back a few hours ago, so I'm home.
Cool.
And I'm in my good old office. So.
Alrighty. Well, we're gonna get back to. I mean, we were talking about Web3 last week, but it was more around energy. And so this week we're going to talk about ETAs, Ethereum Transactions as a Service. And you guys can probably hear all that beeping in the background. Their vessels rolling by where I am. So basically, Ethereum Transactions as a Service. So basically, we built this as a way to bypass Ethereum transactions from the user point of view. And for us, it was a challenge because we had just regular people, real estate agents, that were using our website, and we were using not quadratic. We were using quadratic voting, and some other fun mechanisms to basically weed out spam. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But basically, the users didn't want to deal with wallets, and I don't think they still don't. Or gas or anything like that. So I thought it would be good to go through that, and maybe someone will break it off and run with it and turn it into a product, and solve all these issues in Web3. So with that said, let's start from the beginning. So Brock, why don't you kick us off and just why did we do this? How did you guys design this thing?
Yeah. So as you were mentioning, the problem we were having was like user onboarding. So non-Web3 folks getting in and using a Web3 product, they had to like create a Metamask account, which requires like writing down a seed phrase, keeping track of that. And there's a lot of like education required, and it's a third-party system, so you can't, as a like product owner, you can't necessarily help your users through that. And this was also 5 years ago, so it was a lot rougher on the edges than it is today. And so we were trying to think of ways to let people participate in Web3 without having to go through all of these hoops. So kind of what we were coming up with was this idea of transactions as a service, where there's this concept of a multi-sig proxy wallet. So it's like basically we would have a hosted way of providing them an identity within Web3. And so we could link like an email to a Web3 wallet address, for instance, and we would kind of be that centralized go-between to help facilitate it.
Cool. And John, so you were sort of receiving all these transactions on the back end, and one of the big challenges that we had was it was basically clogging our own internal network. We had all these transactions that were piling up, and then they were, call it, noncing out, for lack of a better word, and so you came up with some creative things around how to do that. But before we jump into that, so basically what we did was so instead of having to download MetaMask, we put the wallet right into the UI, right? And we gave the user did we give the users the seed, or did we host those?
They were locked. If I remember, they were locked.
Well, I was going to say, I think with like ETOS specifically, I can't remember if we ever fully rolled it out. So I think what we had in our app was like a custom wallet solution where we could control the user onboarding process of like, here's your seed phrase, you remember to write it down, et cetera, et cetera. And that like felt cohesive as part of the product. And so then ETOS, I can't remember if we launched it fully or not. I think it was still in development phases.
I believe I believe we semi-launched it because any transaction that came through for a given user, we were the ones responsible making sure that it went to a responsible pool, and that pool through multi-sig had the permission in the smart contract to go do a change. So in essence, we were kind of using pools per user. Everyone was assigned a pool ID, so it was kind of just a rotating kind of assignment system to where you had, say, 20 users, 10 pools. First 10 users got assigned to the first 10 pools, and then the next 10 got assigned to the following 10 pools. That way we could balance off transaction, and because we were paying the transaction fee that way.
So that's an important issue because right now, if you want to go, you want to sign up for an app, it's gotten a lot easier. You
Mm-hmm.
can, as long as you can get through MetaMask, then you can pretty much use Web3 apps. They make it easy enough where you just click a button and sync with the
Yep.
app. But it's still foreign to a lot of people. And then gas is also foreign. Now, this as time goes on, people just get used to it. But I still think I think it's somewhat necessary today because if you can figure out a way to properly either host those keys or, I thought we even talked about putting them in a smart contract at one point, um, and just or have somebody else custody it. Somebody that doesn't want to go through MetaMask is not going to care if somebody else custodies their keys as long as they're a reputable vendor. And so the gas transactions, these micro transactions that you have to pay when you interact with a smart contract, creates friction, and it prohibited us from scaling to some degree. So basically, we helped handle the wallet, I guess you could say, as John just explained, and then but we were paying for the gas. We were subsidizing that cost. But then let's talk about the nonce issue. So as we were clicking around, we had this voting mechanism so that people could basically vote on what they believed was spam in their local market. So those listings would get flagged. They'd go to arbitration. People could vote in arbitration. It was pretty cool. And then but the problem was we were all testing this out. Bunch of transactions pile up, and I think John, you came up with what we had 10 pools. But why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah, so the pooling mechanism helped us solve a lot of issues with having to uh, pay for transactions on behalf of the user and work that into our business model, but it came with an inherent different risk, which was that we had to be responsible for knowing what nonce went with what user, tracking the nonce. But also, since so much of our business logic was coupled to those contracts, if a transaction failed for some reason or something was taking longer than expected, there was downstream effects. Either the experience on the user facing side was not ideal, or and keep in mind who our target audience is. They would resubmit 6 or 7 times, thinking it didn't happen because they were used to the Web 2 way of doing things. And on the back end, this is causing kind of a bottleneck effect where the transaction is getting overridden so many times that it kind of gets stuck in the stale state to where then the contract has to wait X amount of times. The transactions have to drop off, and I remember multiple times we had to go in manually, being the signer of the wallet, and manually override the transaction with the same nonce but with a stupid high gas allowance just to unblock the chain. So that comes with another thing, was that having these pools helped distribute kind of the transactions in a way that it was easier to kind of take on volume. But from a kind of a business logic side of it, it also still created a bottleneck because that asynchronous and delay component was very hard to kind of work around in our system.
If you guys were going to design that again today, would you design it the same way, or would you remove, add, change things with some of the newer technology that's now out there?
Definitely use an L2. If we still had to be a custodial, everyone would have their own wallet, use an L2. do some degree of settlement so that after 24 hours of transaction, you try to settle and send that to an L1. But that way, you have you have a faster. I think every L2 block is every 2 seconds, so it's a lot faster. So 2 seconds is the equivalent of maybe a bad experience on an old website, but it's still faster than a traditional 30, 40 seconds, or even a few minutes, depending on the type of transaction. So that's actually a really interesting idea. I think there is still a demand for that. I think in today's atmosphere of people afraid if you don't own your keys, it's not your crypto. So I think that's kind of I think a completely different thing to discuss. But I think there's a lot of technologies out there that would make this a lot faster and a lot more um, performant than it was. Plus, the smart contract Solidity code has gotten more mature as a language that you don't have these weird null. You have these null checks that prevent you from having addresses that are zeroed out. So yeah, stuff
So
like that.
so 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 let's ride that wave for a sec. So Brock,
Yeah.
you came up, Brock, you had an idea of putting the keys in a smart contract. Was that sort of a multi-sig idea, or you just talk a little bit about that? Because at the time, maybe it's obsolete now, but at the time it was a really unique idea, and maybe it still is.
I think it still could be. And the way I think through it, it's almost more like having an on-chain password manager. So the idea being that there's an actor, that actor can add a secret on-chain using this contract, and then only that actor can read it out later. So it kind of gives you the ability to do that with encryption keys, where like our system could add an encryption key to a contract. It could read it as needed to encrypt and decrypt things. But the actual storage of that key is on chain. So we're never like the full custodians. And then you can also get hypothetically fancier where you can like delegate access to that key. So like using the contract functions, you could have somebody like pay for access, for instance. You could share it with another wallet address, whatever it might be. But it just kind of goes deeper into the wallet address as an identity concept.
So if somebody
So
doesn't develop that idea, they're crazy, because this is just one of those like nuggets that of this isn't even the app that we were building, but man, if we just built that we would have been successful 100 times over, because that's such an issue. My dad is a prime example. He owns he owns ETH, he owns Bitcoin, and it's too foreign to him to own this long string of characters. It freaks him out. And my sister's kind of like that too. And so, I do you see kind of things eventually going that way, or do you think that it'll just stay with custodians and you know either you have your keys like John, to your point, or you don't?
I think a vast majority of people will trust a centralized authority. I think it's too easy not to. I think the flip side of that is I'm hopeful for hardware keys like YubiKeys, ledgers, those sorts of things where you still are in control, but you don't have to remember things. It's like a physical thing you put on your keychain and carry it around with you. And it's the most secure way to do it at the moment.
yeah, something like a biometric where your UB key is your wallet. You plug it in, and there's some type of unified uh, firmware layer that allows it to connect into anything. I was gonna say with the smart contract, just to kind of pivot back real quick. Some of the cool things that we're starting to see with like Chainlink and stuff can give these contracts some very cool features. Especially the hardest thing was like we wanted to have contracts that were time sensitive, but then you needed to have an Oracle set up and all these things. And as you're seeing a lot of Ethereum service providers start to think about providing that as a service, that could be a way for people to build a hybrid model where those keys are time sensitive, but also you can kind of feed in that Web 2 data that's needed to give kind of an ownership. How do I put it? When you do OAuth, you have scopes, kind of giving scopes to certain people. I think that would actually be a great hybrid model to then pivot to a full hardware model potentially.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting that was like biometric data. I think that's the only way it could really work. And talk about market the beast and all that crazy stuff. I mean, that's like a good thing and a bad thing. For a guy like me, it's
Yeah.
actually good because I'm always looking for my phone or my coffee or whatever. But but it's also it's permanent
Hmm.
and it's but it kind of anyway, we don't have to harp on this too much, but it kind of leads us into a discussion around soulbound NFTs, and maybe that'll be a discussion for next week because Vitalik's last blog post talked a little bit about that, and I think the two are a similar topic. But in terms of the rerouting back to the gas fees, so that's still always going to be a thing, at least with Ethereum. And Ethereum right now, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be the at least top dog in a lot of the application development. And so, do you guys just foresee that? I guess regular people coming from Web 2, they're just going to have to go and learn that, or do you kind of see things going down a different path already, or people working on this problem?
I believe people are going to start naturally going down this route because over the last 20 years with the dot-com bubble and with a lot of things we've seen in Web 2, you're starting to see a lot of those facades, like look at Celsius, Voyager, like these central entities that no one would bat an eye, crumble, and even like other companies that don't even manage keys but information. Like people, the idea of owning your data, owning your identity, your data, and your money, and even your own land. I think it's still very, at least in pop culture, people. If you look on TikTok and stuff, people are like, if you want crypto, don't don't buy. No offense, Brock. Don't buy it on Coinbase. This or that. Keep it in a wallet. And I think that generation from I'd say 15 to 25 are really can identify with that. So I think it's up and coming, definitely.
Is that what you think, Brock?
I think I think people like the idea of self custody. In practice, it becomes impractical for a lot. That's been my experience, at least. It's like as much, like even for myself, like I know best practices, and I still like struggle to actually follow through on them because there's like so many hoops to jump through. It's I think there needs to be a few more like iterations of user experience there.
So right now, basically, MetaMask is the or MetaMask or Coinbase Wallet. I'm not really sure. Or there's a few out there right now, and
Hmm.
you can use these between different chains. So that's sort of I guess 1.0. And gas, it sounds like is the solution made sense for us, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be a widespread uh, opportunity, I guess you could say.
I think it would be really cool from like a marketing standpoint is if somebody like MetaMask said, "Hey, sign up for a wallet, and we'll fund your first 5 transactions." Like it gets complicated from a
Mm.
technology standpoint, but it'd be really cool if somebody pulled that off because it could lower the barrier to entry.
So that's exactly what we were trying to do, and that's a great idea because once it's like anything else, right? As soon as you do it and you're not as scared, you're just like, okay, like it
Right.
worked, and then
Yep.
you just
Yep.
it just becomes normal, and so I think that's a really good idea, and I guess maybe MetaMask and some of the other wallets. Because that when we ran the number, I mean, look, it was a big cost to us, but we were very very small, and so hey, maybe someone will listen to this and or Jacob, maybe we reach out to him. But that's a great idea. I think that anybody building a wallet right now should definitely do that. Make that part of their fundraise.
It'd be super cool. I can't pretend to have like a great idea on how to pull it off. I think you'd have to like watch the mempool and almost do like a sandwich attack, but in reverse, where you're like depositing ETH into the wallet that's about to submit the transaction before it gets submitted on chain.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was the last thing I was going to ask you because security was a big thing for us, and it is for a lot of people. It's stressful launching a smart contract, and especially because you're
Yeah.
dealing with money. And so, what were some of the security vulnerabilities? And if somebody was going to implement something like this today, or if we were going to do it today, what are some of the considerations?
Uh, the biggest one is what's stopping. How do you KYC someone without KYCing them? Because what's stopping someone from running a bot? Pretty
Right.
much
How do you stop gamification?
exactly. 1,000 wallets, 5 grand, right there.
Yep.
Well, couldn't we just add to the pools, not infinitely, but wasn't that our solution? Basically, we'll just continue to add pools so they don't pile up, or was that unrelated to what you're
Yeah.
talking about?
It was related. It was related, but also those pools had to be added to the multi-sig contract, and everything went through this like I don't want to say catalyst, but we had one multi-sig contract where a transaction had to be signed, submitted to multi-sig, approved, because that was an issue we had to deal with. This any change to this contracts, the bytecode had to be approved by the majority and then executed with the VM via the contract. So adding pools dynamically would not be reasonable. It'd be a very manual process. I think that's where we got stuck.
Okay, all right, yeah. Well. So the last thing I wanted to wrap up on was it wasn't quadratic voting.
We
What
lose
was the
them?
what was it called? What was the technical term? They were nobody's really been talking about this in a while, but it was maybe it was called quadratic voting, but it was the mechanism that we were using. So it's basically okay. So I live in Telluride, Colorado. I see a house that because this happens all the time on Zillow. It's real estate agents leave their listings up because they want to even when they sell a property because they want to generate new leads. But I know as another real estate agent that house sold or is under contract, and so I can go on and flag it, and by flagging it, it goes into arbitration. Other people in the local community can vote. Oh yeah, I've seen that too. It's under contract. I agree. And then this pool, this smart contract that we created, it collects all these funds, these transactions, and then we pay it out to the winner of this. So it's a big experiment. But I haven't seen many other projects that seriously have pursued this. Have you guys?
I have not.
I would say it's a lot of DAOs do something similar now, like with governance voting.
Mm.
It's not quite the same use case as curation, but it's very similar mechanics.
Okay. So basically, it sounds like from you guys, though, you could build something like this out. Like if we were building a consumer product today, we probably would do this if we were trying to capture an older audience. If we were trying to get, our generation or Gen Z or somebody younger, those guys are all pretty much getting familiar with this if they're not already. And so, but, I still think that I'm interested to see where things go with wallet, and I agree with your guys' point that most most people are going to trust somebody to custody their keys, but I don't know. We'll see.
It'd be great if people were self-trusting. I just think we're a few steps away.
Even after Celsius and all that jazz, but I guess we said that back in 2018. Same kind of stuff happened, and but I would like to think
Well,
that
and
cohort learned their lesson.
but even those cases, it wasn't that funds got stolen. It's their funds were locked away and like staked, and then they couldn't pull them back out. So it was more about like who owned the funds, not who controlled the wallet.
Yeah, but yeah, if I had 100 grand with Celsius, I wouldn't care what happened to it. I just would want to. But you're trusting the vendor to either write the code and it's secure, or to not be malicious and put it and make bad investments.
And I also think it came down to their business model. Their business model was customers were not customers, they were unsecured creditors at the end of the day, just like Voyager. So,
Okay. And then one thing I want to start doing next week, but if you guys have any thoughts on this, we can hit on it. But I thought at the end of each discussion, let's just if you heard about a cool project that's working on something, because these things fly up all the time, and that's how I'm always like calling you, Brock. Brock, look at what these guys are doing. We should try this out. John, look at, we're always ping ponging things back and forth, and now is the time that we're going to start seeing some creative projects. Well, not now, but we'll see them coming out of the woodworks probably in the next year, 18 months, 2 years.
Yep.
Have you guys seen anything recently that you looked at?
I've been looking at some DAOs for like managing. I forgot the name. It was like for option contracts. It's like for buying options, but I think they're supported with synthetics, but I can't remember. But it was a way of doing banking, like using Chainlink to bring in like market data and stuff. I don't know how it functions, but it's weird because a lot of today's banking and trading, like um, uh, HFT or high frequency trading, it's just all in data and like small margin and volume. But to get that type of data through a system, it's very hard to see that in a decentralized way because you need some big computers to kind of compute. So that's the latest kind of thing. Like, how can you take some of these large hedge funds that make a stupid amount of money with very high margin, very high leverage, and kind of turn that into a DAO. So, seen some cool stuff on that.
I love
Very cool.
DAOs. They're not there yet, obviously, but the idea of that DAOs and fractionalization of an NFT, I think obviously, real estate's definitely gonna. I mean, I'd be surprised if someday when you buy a house, you're not getting an NFT as the title, and just being able to fractionalize real world assets. I mean, I put a blog post out on that in like 2017. I thought if crypto got to this point, because it's I mean, it's come a long way in a short amount of time. That at least there'd be some people trying that stuff out, and maybe there are, and I haven't heard of them. But really, it's just like regulation is really holding a lot of things up, because every institution that we talk to, it's like, yeah, this is great, we want to use it, but we don't know where the line is in the sand. So hopefully that'll start to change. I mean, it sounds like the Fed's working on a central bank currency, which that actually sucks, but it shows that at least
So minting
governments
would be
are
easy.
thinking about
It'd
it.
be like 10 seconds. Take 10 seconds to mint the stimmy dollars.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's we'll wrap it there. Next week we'll talk about, well, we'll see, but we're gonna get the website up and running, and we'll get some, hopefully, maybe people will just email and shoot us some ideas on what else we want to hit on. But for this week, we'll wrap it there and
Thank you for having us.
chat next week.